Hello and welcome to our episode of the Bible in 1 year with the preacher's husband. Today we are talking about 2 Samuel chapter 10 and 1 Chronicles chapter 19, and we're also adding on Psalm 20 today for our reading. So let's get with it. The title of this chapter is 2 Samuel chapter 10 is War with the Ammonites. We are going to battle, folks. We are battling. It's wartime. So it says here, sometime later the king of Ammonites died, and his son Hanun became king in his place. Now I found it very ironic that the name Hanun means gracious, because gracious he was not. It says, Then David said, I'll show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me. Now Nahash was the Ammonite ruler that Saul defeated, and we read about that in 1 Samuel chapter 11. Nahash apparently honored Israel's term of peace and with the Ammonites on into David's reign. So he honored that peace agreement with David as well. Hanun shaved off their beards. Essentially what happened here, David decided he's going to show some kindness, and he sent some emissaries to console Hanun in his time of loss, his time of grief with his father, but Hanun was not having any of it. He basically came and shaved off their beards, essentially. Some versions say they shaved off half their beards, and some says that he shaved off their beards, but he did not receive them graciously. He basically made them look ridiculous. He gave them a ridiculous looking appearance, but he also made them appear to be in violation of the law of Moses. If we read in, like we read in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 27, or it might have made them look like they were in mourning, like we read in Isaiah 15:2 or Jeremiah 41:5. He also cut their clothes in half at the hips, exposing their private parts. Now that was very humiliating too. Now David sent a delegation to the deeply humiliated men. That way they wouldn't have to come all the way back to Jerusalem. He advised them to just stay in Jericho where they were. And that was pretty much to avoid any further humiliation. He said, just stay there until your beards grow back and you look normal again. So that kept them from being humiliated in front of the village and all the people that they knew. The Ammonites must have known that their actions were going to be bad and not received very well by David. So Ammon had probably determined to try to free themselves from Israelite dominance. So they purchased the assistance of 33,000 additional soldiers from the Arameans. Now, some versions of the Bible say the Syrians. So the Syrians and the Aramaeans were essentially the same people. The Ammonites and the Aramaeans thus banded together against David. Now David realized that his control to the north and to the east was in bad jeopardy, so he dispatched Joab and all of his elite troops to counter his enemies. The Ammonite-Aramaean strategy was to force Israel to fight a war on two fronts. This was something that Joab and his forces did not realize until they'd have to do. They didn't realize they were going to have to do this until they got there. At that point, they were just faced with that obstacle. They had to do it. So Joab divided his troops into two groups. He determined that the Aramaeans are probably going to be the most challenging, so he chose the finest men to stay with him to fight those guys. And Joab's brother Abishai, he was another seasoned warrior actually. He led the second group against the Ammonites. Nonetheless, such a strategy was very risky. We've seen two-front wars many times throughout history, especially in the world wars. Germany, for instance, World War II, they had a multi-front war that they had to fight. They were not successful. The Ammonites knew any hope of victory over Israel was gone when the Aramaeans started to flee, though. They entered the city of Rabbah, which was their capital, to defend it from siege. Joab, though, he withdrew. He was content for now to return to Jerusalem with the victory. Now, the Aramaeans probably feared that Israel was going to try to regroup and come and get them again, so they regrouped. Then the king Hadadezer, who David had earlier subdued, gathered the Arameans even from distant city-states across the Euphrates River. They gathered at Helam, about 30 miles east of the Sea of Galilee. Now, David could not ignore this second threat, though. They were building up their armies big time, so he crossed the Jordan River to face them head on. He wanted to keep the battle outside of Israelite territory as much as possible. What that does is that eliminates collateral damage and damage happening to his home people. If any damage was going to happen, it was going to happen out there. We do that a lot in the United States, and people get ill about it. They say, why would we attack somebody else on their soil when we're safe over here? Well, it keeps them from coming over here and attacking us on our soil when that happens. It's biblical. There it is, biblical war strategy, so to speak. So again, David attacks. The Arameans fled before Israel. The extent of the victory is indicated by the comment that David struck down Shobach, who was the commander of their army. And after this, the Arameans, or the Syrians, were afraid to ever even help the Ammonites again. So we flip over to 1 Chronicles chapter 19, and essentially we get the very same story. There are a few little tidbits, minor details that are different, but overall it's pretty much the same. So we're going to skip on forward to Psalm 20. Now in Psalm 20, the title is Deliverance in Battle in the CSB. In the King James Version it says, The Assistance of God's Saving Work. Very interesting. This is a Psalm of David. A couple things stuck out to me. The first one was verse 1. Verse 1 says, May the Lord answer you in a day of trouble. May the name of Jacob's God protect you. To me, this sounds very similar to a benediction. But a day of trouble can refer to any distress at all. But right here in this case, it is clearly a crisis caused by enemies. The use of Jacob's name as well was a reference to the nation of Israel. And this emphasized that personal aspect of God's relationship with his people. So it kind of personalizes God's relationship with his people. Then we get to verse 4 stuck out to me. May he give you what your heart desires and fulfill your whole purpose. I thought, wow, that's amazing. He'll give me everything that my heart desires. How cool is that? Well, the thing about this is the heart's desires and the purpose, God's purpose that we're talking about, are related in the sense that God's purpose and his people's desires should be one and the same thing. Your heart's desires should be the same thing as God's purpose for you. So, what do you think about all that? Pop it in the comments section if you have something to talk about. Otherwise, click that like button and that subscribe button, and of course click the little jingle bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a video, which will be tomorrow when we dive into Psalm 65, 66, 67, 69, and 70. I hope to see you then. Peace.